Sometimes, despite low expectations due to tiredness of genre, inexperienced studio, and general skepticism, you get an absolute masterpiece, like it happened with Lies of P just about a month ago. But sometimes you get Lords of the Fallen, the game which hype is carried on a single cool concept that ultimately ends up as an unpolished and unfocused mess. What is weird is that despite all of its innumerable flaws, I found myself enjoying a fair part of it. I am saying it here because I want to make it clear that I don't criticize this game because I hate it, but because I want you to be aware of what this game is and what it is not, so you can make decisions about purchasing it or not based on your values. Because this game is by no means terrible and has something to offer. Lords of the Fallen is a screaming example of great ideas with poor implementation, so why don't we dive into it and find what went wrong? Let's quickly skim over the technical state of the game, aka performance and bugs. I played the game on PS5, so if you're playing on the other platform, definitely check videos about how it performs there. It is definitely not perfect, and I heard some serious concerns from performance even on mid-tier machines. On PS5, quality mode is strictly unplayable. FPS is constantly below 30. I can't say for sure how it performs on large encounters because it took me 3 seconds to realize this is not going to work. So I went to settings, switched to performance mode and turned off motion blur and other features. Not because they are impacting performance, though I think they are, but because they make me dizzy. Anyway, with these settings, I would describe game performance as playable. FPS drops from time to time, but now it is an occasional thing rather than constant state. It was a bit annoying, but not to the game-breaking level, with exception of one boss with summons and buttload of particle effects. From the bugs in my entire playthrough, I spotted a few visual bugs, most of them minor and fixed themselves in a few seconds. But one was during the boss fight and refused to go, which resulted in a failed attempt, because it obscured a big part of the boss, preventing me from reading the moves. Fixed itself after respawning. Only once in the entire playthrough I stuck in textures. After exiting the main screen and going back, the issue was fixed. Enemies did stuck in textures a few times as well. What do you need to make them unstuck? Don't know, I just abused the bug to my advantage and moved on. I can't believe I'm saying that, but by 2023 standards, this game's technical state is not that bad. This was a symbolic minute of silence in honor of game dev quality. Now let's talk about lore, story, and characters. Evil demigod Adir was exiled from Axiom, world of the living, 100 years ago by worshippers of another demigod Aureus, hallowed sentinels. To seal him away, they created 5 beacons. Over time, those beacons were corrupted, and if not fixed, the question of Adir return is only a matter of time. As hallowed sentinels straight off the path, Dark Crusaders get formed to maintain the order and restore the beacons. You unwillingly enrolled into Dark Crusaders ranks by receiving the lamp from Crusader Isaac before he died in the hands of Light Reaper. Now you inherit his task of cleansing the beacons with this lamp. As you progress through the quest, you learn more about Adir and Aureus, realizing that the order established by Judge Clerics is as cruel and bloody as Adir's, if not worse. You kill the guys defending beacons, and then based on your decision on cleansing the beacons or not, you get your ending. You either seal Adir or allow him to return, plus one secret ending. And that's pretty much it for the main plot. Humanity stuck in a conflict between higher powers where one side looks plain evil and the other creates visibility of order and prosperity, but under the hood is not a single bit better. Where have I seen it before? Anyways, having a similar premise is not an indicator of a ripoff. You can take a very popular idea and have your own take on it. Unfortunately, I don't believe Lords of the Fallen gave its own perspective. It felt really shallow. Maybe I didn't deep dive enough into the lore of the game, but the problem is I didn't want to. There was nothing inviting me to do that. To be deadly honest, when I played Elden Ring or Dark Souls 3, I was watching a lot of videos from lore hunters on YouTube. I didn't have time or resolve to search for those pieces at this moment. However, I was really engaged. Those games gave me the hook. They invited me into this lore hunting. These stories are like puzzles with missing elements, so naturally you want to find those elements. And I loved it about them, even though I got those pieces not by myself. Lords of the Fallen does not provide this feeling. I finished the story and I feel like I know everything I need to know. Main character. In the spirit of most of the Souls games, this character is defined by the player and his actions, which means there is no character development arc in its common interpretation. However, game can be crafted in such a way that it will lead most of the players through this arc. I will probably create a separate video about storytelling structure in Souls games, but for the purpose of this review, I'm going to say I didn't feel like Lords of the Fallen capable of creating this feeling. At least it didn't work for me. On the other hand, there are side quests with their own characters and arcs. Those are crucial elements adding a bit of a soul to the Souls games, pun intended. Because the character you play is a silent hero on the mission, without those side quests, the game will be missing any kind of colors. To the credit of Lords of the Fallen, they did it right. Most of the side quests feature characters with their own development arcs, and those arcs are not isolated. Every arc gives some kind of an insight about the world, justifying the presence of those quests. On top of that, those characters are dubbed really well. So overall, Lords of the Fallen story is not on the highest level, but thanks to some of the side quests, it doesn't really hold the game back. But enough of that, let's move to the important part. Starting from the combat basics, Lords of the Fallen has all the Souls stuff you can expect. Light and heavy attacks that can be chained into combos, dodge rolls, blocks, parries, magic, and ranged weapons. This is all tried and true framework, but where it falls short is implementation. The first thing that stood out for me was a really long step forward that was following all the attacks. With some weapons, like with swords, it launches you literally in a freaking another universe. When I saw it initially, I actually thought, oh, it's a good thing. In Elden Ring or Dark Souls or Sekiro or Lies of P or even Jedi Fallen Order, on numerous occasions I ended up swinging weapon in the air out of the enemy reach. It is especially bad if you play slow heavy weapons where you usually count on staggering the enemy, but instead find yourself stuck in extremely long animation. However, in Lords of the Fallen, this mechanic is implemented extremely poorly. First, there is a close to no target tracking. Enemy can move just a little bit on the side, and if your attack doesn't have a wide arc, you will miss. The worst part though is not missing the hit, but ending up behind the enemy absolutely mispositioned. Keep in mind I'm talking right now about playing with lock on. You can simply forget about playing this game without it, because there's no sticking to the enemy in your attack arc whatsoever. I understand when it happens when you are trying to attack a highly mobile enemy capable of evading players' attacks. But no, literally any enemy can do it to you in Lords of the Fallen. Another problem, and this is another reason why you can find yourself behind the enemy, the range of the stab is not conditional. Take for example God of War 2018 or Ragnarok. Those games are built around push forward philosophy. However, how far you will step forward with attack depends on the target position. It has the capability of launching you pretty damn far, but if the enemy was right in front of you, it will not. You will travel just enough distance to your target and no further. Lords of the Fallen is committed to move your character for the entire distance no matter what, unless there is a hard obstacles along the way. Lords of the Fallen input queue handling is also pretty bad. Basically, actions that require input using 2 buttons are not handled properly at all. For example, I am mid-swing and after a swing I want to perform action with a lamp or cast a spell or shoot. In this game it is done by holding L2 or left trigger to get the lamp or ranged weapon out and then by pressing the action button, for example R1 or right bumper. So I press and hold L2 and then tap R1, but what happens, only R1 is registered in the queue. So instead of performing a ranged attack, my character does another swing. It not only leaves my character vulnerable, it also repositions it with its massive step to the place I never wanted my character to be. But this is not even the worst scenario. Sometimes it happens with dodge directional inputs. Yes, you heard me right. On multiple occasions, I wanted to roll to the side, but because I inputted the roll before previous action was over, directional input was not registered in the queue, so my character stepped back instead. Like, WTF? Why? There are multiple other smaller issues with combat in this game, like hitboxes, inconsistent cancelling, inconsistent stagger damage, etc. I won't be going over all of them, it may take a while, and none of those are as annoying as the problems I described above. But put all together, all of it results in a sloppy, inconsistent, and sometimes simply frustrating experience. However, there are a few things I want to give Lords of the Fallen credit for. First of all, controls on the gamepad. Input queue issues aside, the way you use lamp, spells, and ranged weapons is so convenient. You choose between lamp or spells or ranged weapon on the D-pad, and when you hold L2, left trigger, it activates contextual actions on the other buttons. For example, with ranged weapons, R1 will become a quick shot, R2 will become an aimed shot, triangle, cross, and square will allow you to switch between equipped ammo types. Similarly, it works for spells or for the lamp actions. It is not something groundbreaking, but for me personally it was way more convenient comparing to what Elden Ring or Dark Souls offered in terms of switching to ranged weapons and using different types of ammo. This approach plays nicely into the emphasis on the range combat in this game. Ammo in this game is not a consumable, but a resource that gets renewed every time you rest. And while you may want some ammo pouches to restore some ammo between rests, in most cases I was simply using my base capacity without being worried that I will need to grind for more ammo. Combined with a nice control scheme, it created a hybrid combat, where I fought the enemy in close combat, but when they started to run, teleport, or create damaging areas around themselves so I couldn't get close, I just pulled my crossbow out and shot them, sometimes interrupting what they were doing. Again, this is nothing new in industry, but I think it is well done in this game. It is important to mention that combat in Lords of the Fallen is very forgiving, especially as far as Souls subgenre goes. Parry windows and iframes are very generous, especially when you come to this game from the game like Lies of P. Most of the enemies are quite easy, but if you are struggling, you can always cheese through the situation by buying a bunch of ammo pouches or mana stones just to kill everything at range. The fact that this game is quite easy in a way saved it for me. I didn't like the combat system, I don't think it is good, but because I was basically slicing through it without any significant troubles, I could cope with it. If Lords of the Fallen was more challenging with its sloppy combat, this section of review would be much less forgiving. As I said in my Lies of P review, I'm quite indifferent to regular encounters in majority of Souls-like games. Lord of the Fallen is not an exception. You take down regular enemies in just a few hits, and the best strategy is to pick them one by one, or in small groups. There are no cool combos, mobility features, etc. to make those encounters fun, flashy, and engaging. Majority of Souls games are simply not designed for encounters with large number of enemies. I don't like those, but I don't hate them either. They are just serviceable. Story is a bit different with some of the elite enemies. In Lords of the Fallen, it is a bit hit or miss. Some of them feels like mini bosses and even give you some fun. Sometimes even more fun than with some of the actual bosses. Of course, after you get disposed of other trash enemies, thankfully you have a crossbow for that. But some are simply annoying. Dudes with holy shields, for example. They are not hard, but because hitting their shield will damage you back, you are forced to parry and wait for the opening. It would be fine if there were only a few of them, but because those are quite common enemies, you just feel stalled when fighting them. Or the bucketheads, with those terribly telegraphed attacks and close to unbreakable poise. Again, you are forced to wait when his very weird and long combo is over, so you can land a few hits. All of those do not feel challenging, but simply annoying. Ultimately, I don't think regular and elite enemies let Lords of the Fallen down in comparison with other Souls-like games. Take it with a grain of salt, since I am rarely excited about non-boss encounters in Souls games. What actually lets the Lords of the Fallen down is the bosses. Let me be crystal clear here from the beginning. If the interesting, challenging, memorable boss fights are the main reasons you play Souls-like games, steer clear from Lords of the Fallen. I found only a few boss fights enjoyable from the entire game, despite being much easier than Lies of P, a statement that can be supported by a number of tries. Lords of the Fallen bosses made me rage much more. Most of them have only a few moves to memorize, but instead, fights are artificially made difficult by some bullshit, like constant summons, or boss teleporting away, or boss AoE attacks originating from different directions, so you have to spin the camera like crazy to avoid all of them. And there's one particular boss that combines all of this, and because of the enemies and particle effects, adds terrible frame rate drops on top. And if the boss somehow doesn't have any bullshit mechanics, it is 1, 2, maximum 3 tries on memorable fights. Devs have a lot of homework on boss design. Fortunately, even bullshit fights are quite easy and cheesable. You also can have a summon to help you with it. I would highly recommend doing it so on some fights, especially on the fight I'm showing right now. With all the BS and lags going on, there's no chance you are going to enjoy this one, so just get done with it and move on. As I said in the beginning, there are some things to enjoy in this game, but bosses are not one of them. I know a lot of people play Souls games explicitly for bosses, so if you're one of them, there is nothing to catch in Lords of the Fallen. There are two versions of the world coexisting in the game. Axiom, aka Realm of the Living, and Umbral, aka Realm of the Dead. The Umbral Realm is built on top of the Axiom, featuring additional elements, platforms, passages, loot, and enemies. I am saying that Umbral is built on top of Axiom and not vice versa, because in all my time with Lords of the Fallen, I never encountered a situation where something has been accessible in Axiom but not in Umbral. Umbral is always more. As a trade-off, Umbral is a very hostile place. Not only does it have more enemies by default, the more you stay there, the more enemies will spawn, and the stronger enemies will spawn. Stay in the Umbral Realm long enough and a Red Reaper will appear and possibly one-shot you. So naturally, while you have to go to the Umbral Realm willingly to progress through the environmental puzzle or to collect some valuable loot, for example, all flask upgrades are placed in the Umbral Realm, you want to leave it as soon as possible. It could be a controversial opinion, but I think devs nailed this feeling of unwelcoming hostile realm, creating these thrills as you travel through it. Some reviewers expressed the opinion that those overwhelming hordes of enemies is just some bullshit. While I agree that fights against those are no good, I think those are by design. It is not supposed to be pleasant, it is supposed to force you to find a way to exit the Umbral Realm as fast as you can. On many occasions by running through enemies instead of killing them. The downside of this decision though is that it makes environmental puzzles more flat than they could be. Well, I'm saying puzzles, but it is kind of an overstatement. It is usually just, oh, I can't get further, what's in Umbral Realm? Oh, here's some passage available from Umbral Realm, I'm going to use this one. That's it. And it is understandable because solving complex puzzles under the pressure of continuously spawning enemies is not a fun experience. This is a bit sad. Choose developers to create those two realms more symmetric in the sense of some passages available only from Axiom. They could create more sophisticated traversal puzzles involving both realms. Soul River did this. That obviously would require Umbral not to be as hostile as it is. Was this exchange worth it? I don't know. So, how do you move between realms? For this, your character is given a special lamp. Cool thing about Umbral Realm, it is not just a separate area. It literally exists in the same space as the Axiom Realm, which is by no means a small feat to achieve from a technical perspective. By lifting lamp, you can not only check what is going on in the Umbral Realm, but also have some limited interactions with it. For example, a piece of the wall may not exist in Umbral Realm, so to get through it instead of fully getting to the Umbral Realm, you can walk through it by simply holding the lamp. You not only lighting the way for you, you also lighting the enemies existing in the Umbral Realm. Hold the lamp up for too long near them and they will pull you into the Umbral Realm against your will. This concept of partially highlighting and interacting with one realm from the other without actually moving to it is my favorite part of this dual world concept. Sometimes you have to fully enter the Umbral Realm to continue. Umbral is essentially your second chance. Whenever you die in Axiom, you get sent to Umbral automatically. And when you die in Umbral, then, well, you respawn near the Vestige, resetting all non-boss encounters. So, long story short, to get to Umbral you need to die, and you pretty much can kill yourself with the lamp in case you are still in Axiom. Going back to Axiom is a bit more tricky. There are two ways to do so. There are those, I don't remember what they called, let's call it exit points. You can find those here and there, but they are one-time use only, so you can't continuously die, get to those to go back to Axiom and die again. Those points do get reset as you rest. The other way is simply to rest at your Vestige, but then of course it will respawn all the enemies as well. I think there are mixed feedbacks about it, but I think this concept is a very good addition to exploration possibilities. I really enjoyed it. I think the concept was not utilized to its maximum potential, but I hope devs are going to double down on it in their next releases, because I believe it is a real standout and a selling point for this game. That said, I want to voice a few minor concerns about it, which in my opinion could make the game much better. First of all, as I said, I'm interested to see the worlds a little bit more symmetrical, at least at some places, to create more complex environmental puzzles, required to use both realms and not just Umbral. This will require less pressure from continuously spawning enemies and running timer, but game already has an option to pause the timer and grant you safe space near certain NPCs, so it is not like invention of something new. Then there are those memories in Umbral you can rewatch. Those are quite annoying. I do not understand why the player needs to enter the Umbral Realm just to rewatch a piece of lore. Why can't we do it just by lighting it with the lamp from the Axiom? Even worse, a lot of those memories are not located in the safe spaces. Getting distracted by the enemies while you are trying to listen to the dialogue giving valuable insights about the world is simply annoying. And because you are in Umbral, it is not like you can kill everyone and then listen safely, because enemies continuously spawn there. Please give us safe space while we are listening to those dialogues, or let us listen to them from Axiom. Or both. Better both. It is all minor stuff. I really enjoyed this mechanic and I hope we can see a deeper and more refined version of it in the future. From the exploration perspective, it is pretty good on average. It starts somewhat underwhelming at the beginning, but later it opens up with a bunch of smart shortcuts, hidden rooms, alternative paths, and so on. There is one castle area closer to the end of the game that made me so carried away while I was exploring it that I even forgot about the game's sloppy combat for a minute. That's how good it was. From this perspective, some of the areas of the game are absolute top tier stuff. There is also a vestige seed mechanic impacting your exploration. Basically, you have those seeds that are quite a rare consumable that also can be bought for 2500 vigor local XP, which is not much in the end game, but quite a substantial price for early and mid game. Whenever you find the flower bed, you can plant a vestige seed to create a mobile checkpoint. The kicker is you can have only one active at a time. Considering the high price of the seed, you can just go and plant it every time you encounter one of those beds. Again, I heard mixed opinions on this one. Lots of people considered it unnecessary, but I personally think it is a very interesting feature. You see, Souls games for me were a lot about the trade-off, and this is a big one you will have to make. Spend valuable seed and be safe, or risk it for a biscuit and try to push to the next checkpoint or flower bed. If I have any concerns about it, it's only the placement of those flower beds. I think sometimes they are a bit out of place, too close to each other, too close to actual vestige, and sometimes you actually run for a really long time and you want this flower bed, but no, there's nothing. Then we have to discuss visuals. All the areas are very distinct and unique, which is a great thing. However, I would be lying if I said all of them looked good to me. Same as design for exploration, it starts quite underwhelming, but it gets better with time. It is interesting that most good levels to explore are also the best looking, like they were designed by different people. Because levels are getting nicer and more interesting to explore further down the line, you can see a bunch of reviewers who dropped the game after initial few hours describing level design as mediocre. And I don't blame them, because if I judged the game by the first 20%, I wouldn't give it much more credit either. I was glad that I pushed it through and had some fun in the end, but it shouldn't be an expectation from players. From the functional perspective, Oh well, there are a lot of levels with narrow bridges and edges you can fall off. And as we learned, this doesn't really work with combat, where every attack or dodge catapults you into another realm. Quite literally, considering you are very likely to die and be sent to the Umbral Realm from Axiom. Also, the game is using the trick with someone ambushing you out of the corner so often that you lose any sense of surprise when this happens. And there are a lot of tight corridors where a camera can go haywire. Most of the issues I have with the functional part of level design in this game originated actually from the issues with the combat system, so I can't really judge them on their own merits. But as a package, about a third of the areas simply didn't work, and the rest can't be described any better than serviceable. On the paper, Lords of the Fallen has a bunch of stuff to keep players playing. 3 endings, new starting classes unlocked on each ending, new game plus. The problem is, exploration can get me to play the game once, but after that, the game doesn't have anything to offer. There is nothing more to explore, and combat is simply not good enough to keep me playing. I tried a bit NG+, and I tried a bit New Fresh Start, but I couldn't force myself. And because I blundered by cleansing the first beacon, I could not do all 3 endings by loading the backup from the PS Cloud, so Platinum was not on the table unless I fully replayed the game. And since bosses are on average not very good, I was not compelled to search for any optional ones. My advice here is, if you play the game, do not cleanse any beacons till the certain point of the game, and after this make the backup. That will allow you to have all the endings in the end by just loading the backup and altering few choices. So long story short, I enjoyed the first playthrough to some degree, but it was just enough for me. Lords of the Fallen is a very controversial game. Combat is sloppy, boss design is underwhelming, level design is fun to navigate, but functionally it doesn't work well as a package with, again, existing combat. Main story is shallow, however the exploration, the lantern mechanic, the side quests definitely can bring you some fun. If you're looking for interesting and challenging boss fights and a good combat, this game is not for you. But if you are more focused on the exploration and lore hunting, well, I guess there are worse ways to spend your time and money while you're waiting for this Elden Ring DLC.